Hey everybody, it's Craig from the University of Applied Research and Development, and it is our privilege to have Amjid Khazir with us here today. Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Hansen. How are you?
Great to see you. And it's my morning and it's your evening, so thanks very much for being with us.
Oh, that's absolutely fine. Thanks for making the time, for reaching out.
It's our privilege. Love for you to share a bit about your background, your family background, and when you all came from, where you live.
Well, I was born and raised in the UK, in the northeast. My family are originally from Pakistan. My father emigrated here in the 60s. He's sadly no longer with us. But of the seven siblings, all born and raised in the UK, thriving, enjoying life here, working here, contributing.
Fantastic. And so you've established an amazing organisation that's doing some really wonderful things in society. I'd love for you to share your motivation, the background for why you established your organisation.
Of course, Media Cultured, the name of the organization, is a training and social education social enterprise. Now, we focus predominantly on tackling racism, extremism, and all forms of hatred. And we'd like to use film, sport, and art to convey positive narratives that build resilience to hateful, xenophobic attitudes. And we work with schools and colleges, football clubs, not only here in the UK, but we have a bit of an international footprint. My motivations, not only having suffered racism as a young man of a Muslim heritage, Pakistani ethnicity in the UK, were amplified, the motivations that is, were amplified post September 11th. How do we as Muslims address those people who use our faith to commit acts of violence and terrorism? And equally, how do we challenge those people who have felt all that Islam offers the world is hatred and violence? How do we tackle that narrative? And equally, that then spills over into tackling racism and anti Semitism and all forms of hate. Um, Not only had I taken part in work voluntarily in this space of education and bringing communities together post September 11th, but in 2011, the extremist attitudes out there and extremist behavior became more personal to my family. Post the tragic death of my uncle Zubair, a taxi driver at the time who suffered a violent racist assault the night preceding a march by a far right group in my hometown. And 6 weeks after that incident, he tragically passed away. So when we talk about motivations for political reasons, for community, it's also very, very personal to me and my family. And so, through ironically enough, an EU funded grant scheme with the support of the local university, we set up Media Cultured to deliver workshops and sessions and training and events to a wide range of organizations and stakeholders so that we could challenge hate and extremism in all its forms.
So how old were you and where were you on September 11th?
So I'm in my early 20s and I was at university here in Middlesbrough at Teesside University studying communications and marketing. And I remember on the morning of the attack being actually at home, just literally watching TV, and you flick on the news, and in front of your eyes, the world is changed. At that time,
Mm.
although one would have subconsciously thought, who could have done this? Al Qaeda wasn't on the tips of everyone's tongue, as they say, but it became very, very apparent in the course of the day what had happened. And I honestly remember it like it was yesterday. At home watching TV, and I remember flicking over to the news as literally moments before the second plane hit the North Tower, and you just think, literally, my God, what's happening? And I remember the after effects was not only those change in attitudes towards Muslims here, but actually I was sat at a university lecture some weeks after, and a fellow student of mine challenged me to explain why co-religionists of mine could find it within themselves to use this faith to commit acts of violence and terrorism. And that really shook me too, because I had no way of explaining it because I'd practiced this faith. I believe in its tenets. I thank God every day that I was born a Muslim. I got to read the Quran and understand the Quran and practice the faith of Islam. And equally, people of all faiths feel like that, I'm sure, about the faith that they belong to. And to have it challenged so vividly and to have me somehow have to justify one way or the other, how could this happen in the name of Islam, was a really, really difficult time.
Yeah, so I remember watching the West Wing TV show. I don't know if you remember the West Wing from America, and I remember a scene where staff were in a lockdown situation in one of the rooms, and I remember the staff talking and explaining to each other about Al Qaeda and the difference between Islam and Al Qaeda when everyone was saying this is all one thing. And they're saying if you imagine Christianity and you imagine the KKK, that's a similarity of an extremist group, a small sect with a real focus on one particular idea or part of the faith and doubling down on that and excluding all else so that that becomes the purity of their mission. Would you agree with that kind of separation or differentiation and explaining the people involved or responsible for the attacks on the building at that time compared to the religion or the nation of Islam?
Absolutely, I would concur with that analogy in its entirety, and not only for those people who belong to Al Qaeda, but to those who now belong to groups like ISIS and Daesh. Their understanding and interpretation of this faith is so far removed from what the actual faith teaches, even in scenes of engagement, even within the context of war. The religion,
Hmm.
Islam, has introduced rules of engagement that innocent people are not to be harmed. You can't even chop down a tree. Non-combatants are not, somebody that you can in any way address as an enemy combatant or as an opposition soldier. So to think that people could use their faith in this way and attack innocent people, it's literally it actually goes against what the faith teaches. So trying to say, well, the Islam of 1.8 billion Muslims of a book that we follow, which is 1444 years old, is somehow equivocal to the actions of extremists is just ridiculous, in my opinion. And we often hear that the people who hold racist views and anti Semitic views are ignorant. They're just ignorant. They're ignorant of diversity. They're ignorant of other cultures. Well, equally for me, the people who attack others in the name of Islam are ignorant of their own faith. I'm sure you've heard the very famous verse from the Quran many, many times that God will judge those who take the life of one human being unjustly, as if they've taken the life of the whole of humanity. And equally in the Quran it says, and if you save a life, then God will give you the reward as if you've saved the whole of humanity. So there's nothing in Islam in any way, shape, or form, no theological position, no historical injustice, and absolutely no political motivation that can align itself to the Quran. Everything from becoming a soldier in the name of the religion requires you to be compos mentis, requires you to be appointed by a verified, reputable leader of your society who then has to gain the support of Islamic scholars worldwide. And I can assure you that nobody from Al Qaeda and nobody from ISIS have any of that support anywhere near their ideology. So that, and again, itself proves how far they are from the truth of Islam.
Hmm. So tell us about some of the activities that you're doing with, say, you said sports groups, maybe school groups, community groups to breed more tolerance, understanding, and unity in society.
Of course, so as I said, media culture, when we established media culture, There was a particular term that was used in government rhetoric about at-risk institutions in the UK. At-risk being schools, colleges, mosques, where young people could be radicalized. So my contention and the work that we do at Media Culture was about addressing that risk, removing that vulnerability, targeting that isolation. So when we now get the opportunity to make films or go to a football club, we want to use the power of that medium and that message, sport, film, art, and moreover, education, to tackle the narratives that lead people to hate. So we do have the opportunity now to work within schools and colleges and businesses. Sometimes that work is delivered under the banner of diversity and inclusion, safeguarding, or just your standard education, but it allows us to meet people from all backgrounds and tackle a wide variety of hateful, ignorant views. And we're often now tackling far right extremist attitudes, anti Semitic tropes. There was so much around COVID that we addressed. So, schools, colleges, and football clubs are the main body of the people that we support, but we've also recently gone into businesses and public sector organizations more widely.
Amjid, I'm just understanding it a little bit more clearly. So it's really to help organizations and individuals to actually be more open for any other person. This isn't just solely focused on helping people become more comfortable with people of the Muslim faith, correct?
Absolutely. One of the key proponents of our work is we never wanted to seem to be propagating a particular faith. Naturally, I
Right.
have naturally I have a bias towards Islam, being born and raised a Muslim. I have a natural
Hmm.
inclination to want to defend the faith, but it's my religion that teaches me that you can't desecrate another person's holy book. You can't be disrespectful to them as individuals or to insult them or attack their places of worship.
Hmm.
We look around on the back of the rise of Islamophobia and anti Muslim hatred. Equally, anti Semitism has risen, anti immigrant sentiment has risen. On the back of
Hmm.
COVID, we have further hate directed towards people of the Chinese community. So when we don't propagate a faith, what we try and explain to people is we're in this together, as diverse as we are and as
Hmm.
different as we might see the world. Hate and violence will never solve these issues. And now we have the rise of conspiracy theories and red pill movements and incel movements. And what we find is those people who are drawn to these kinds of ideologies, when given a safe space, when they're told, if you have a question, ask it. This is a non-criminalization of even dissenting views. And we can have robust, productive, constructive conversations in spaces. We can answer the questions you have about Islam. We can challenge the tropes about the Jews run the world. If we have a sensible, coherent conversation, the sense of relief on the faces of the young people and the teachers, it's actually palpable.
Hmm.
So we're not
Hmm.
a Muslim organization per se, but this is where we began with, and this is what our base was. We've obviously broadened out into tackling racism and hatred in its entirety.
Hmm. Fantastic. That's really great. So going forward, businesses, schools, community organizations, um, corporates, community agencies that work with different diverse communities as well who may be immigrating into the UK, they could reach out to you to run a workshop, run some sessions, help people understand, ask questions, and gain a greater understanding of. Would you use the word tolerance? What would you use?
That word has actually been challenged, but we have an activity, Craig. It's called Classroom as Country. And in this particular activity, we have a set of 20 arbitrary values that we put on screen. And we ask people to choose one that they identify with. And then we
Hmm.
vote in a very democratic way for the core values that that classroom or that business or that organization identifies with. And tolerance is in there. And oftentimes people will say, well, I don't want to be tolerated. I want to be accepted for who I am, and that's absolutely fine. But we've also got to understand there are people out there who have such bipolar views on the world. There's completely opposite, polar opposite views on sexuality, on whether Jesus is the Son of God or not. So sometimes even the very best of us have to tolerate a view that we might not agree with. So don't be tolerated as a person, but be tolerant to a different view. That's my take on this. And often people will say, yeah, that's fine. As long as I'm not being insulted for my beliefs, I won't insult
Mm.
somebody else. But we've got to sometimes learn, agree to disagree. And I think there's a certain tolerance.
Yeah. So there's a continuum there, I guess, with embracing and including in a close space people who are maybe different. And then there's an acceptance. We accept that people are around us and we include them at different points. Then there's tolerate, which means we know they're around, but I don't have to engage them. But I'm equally decided that I'm not going to abuse them and take away their opportunity, but I'm not actually going to embrace them. So it sounds like there's a bit of a continuum there. Would you see part of your role as helping people move along that continuum, or just simply identify there is one and they need to make a choice?
Sorry, you broke up just there at the end, the last part of your question.
Yeah, would you like to help? Do you see it as your role to help people to just identify that there is a continuum and see where they are on that? Or would you like to help them to move along the continuum?
I would like them to celebrate the continuum. The very, the most amazing thing about humanity, Craig, as I'm sat here as a Pakistani man of Pakistani heritage in England, I I am born and sound and behave and have the cultural attributes of what it means to be English. But equally, I can fall back on my Muslim faith and my Pakistani heritage. And I think what makes diversity so amazing is the fact that we are diverse, that we have, you know, sometimes, some people don't like Indian food, some people love Indian food. Not everything is for everyone, and you're not going to please all of the people all of the time. So if we can celebrate the spectrum and the continuum and get to know one another, and especially cultural awareness, cultural enlightenment, when people ask you the most basic questions about Islam, I've heard people say, "Why do you headbutt the floor?" I'm not headbutting the floor. I'm prostrating the floor. You know,
Right.
they, do you have four wives? You know,
One is
if you're
enough.
well, I'm on zero at the moment, so I think I'm happy as Larry, as they would say. But again, people should be allowed to ask that question. I know that
Yeah.
there's a lot of my peers who take offense to the question, "Where are you from?"
Mm.
When somebody asks, "Where are you from?" No, but where are you really from? That can be that can be sometimes taken as an offensive question, and I can
Right.
understand why. So the amount of times I've heard that question asked of me, and it's been said in a non-offensive way. It's just been a sort of a street culture kind of question. Where are you from, mate? Where are you
Mm.
from? You look Spanish. You look Arabic. I could never have told. You're Pakistani. But then when this accent comes out of this face, it throws people it throws people right off. And that's what I do. I'll have a laugh, but you know, we have to stop it when people say, "Well, you need to go back home because this is my home. This is what I know." When I go to Pakistan as a guest or as a visitor, they see me as a foreigner. They'll
Mm.
see me as someone who looks like them, but I'm not like them. So for me, I think we have to tolerate certain questions. We have to find that space, and we have to, when we're in these spaces, when somebody has a different background, a different sexuality, a different religion, a different view, we have to stop the polarization, the increased polarization, by being
Mm.
more to ask those questions. And I think that's where a lot of the traction that we've gained in our workshops is that sort of approach, right? Non-criminalization. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. This is a safe space. Let's have a question. Let's have a banter. Let's have a joke. Keep it respectful, but ask me what you want. Ask me anything you want. And I honestly, I feel many Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Sikhs, if you were to ask them about their faith, they'd be enthralled and they'd be excited to tell you about it. And
Mm.
equally, when I meet people who are staunch atheists and they say, look, all of you people believe in a fairy god in the sky, and they get really upset and really angry and frustrated with people who go to church, or even now, they get really angry at the fact that there are people mourning the death of Queen Elizabeth II. How can you celebrate a monarch? And how can just calm down, relax, have a conversation. I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm saying you have a different view to some, but let's have a respectful, constructive conversation.
Good. Yeah, that sounds great. I have the privilege of talking to people from around the world, and I usually lead with that question. So tell us about where you're from and your background, because it positions people in it, and then you have something to anchor the conversation on. And I'm a European New Zealander, and I don't often get asked where I'm from. When I do get asked that, because I look like someone from the cartoon Nomeo with my red face and my white beard, and I get to say, hey, look, I'm second generation New Zealander. My grandfather was Danish, came here to make his fortune and married a British lady who was originally from Wales. And, we get to have this conversation about history and what it means, and my lack of understanding of what it actually means to be a white New Zealander when we have such a diverse nation here. We are the biggest or largest population Pacific, hereditary Pacific people. So we have more Pacific people here probably than any other culture. So Samoan, Tongan, Fijian, and a really large, diverse, rich background. People from South Africa, and our native people, though, our Maori people, bring such richness and beauty and flavour and culture and language and art and dance and music and belief, which makes really New Zealand distinctive. And so it gives us this great opportunity, I think, Amjid, to share experiences, share background, share culture, our understanding of our own culture or not, our own beliefs or not, and actually gain some clarity. I think when we know who we are, we know where we come from, and we know what we embrace, it helps us to embrace other people, helps us to become tolerant, accepting, and embracing the differences of others, and be comfortable in that, be comfortable in our own skin, and allowing others to be in their own skin as well. So I love what you're doing. I think what you're doing should be championed. And so I really appreciate you being here with us today to explain that. What's the best way for people, organisations to reach out to you in the UK?
You can visit our website, which is www.mediacultured.org. You can follow us on social media. If you contact us via the contact page on the website, one of the team, if not myself, will get back to you directly. And I just hope we can live up to the words that you've so beautifully articulated there, that we can enrich ourselves by reaching out to people. So reach out to us, reach out to others, and together in this world which is ever so much more smaller than it was in the past, through globalization and the increase in technology, we have an amazing opportunity to bring the world together. We so to talk colonialism, racism, history, war, but we have so much more to celebrate: food, language, music, art, sport, your work, my work. So I very much, Christchurch, the attack at the mosque in Christchurch, and the way the New Zealand people responded, and Prime Minister Ardern, Jacinda Ardern, responded. It really inspired many Muslims around the world, and I think that's what we like to hope to do. So thank you for your kind words about what we do, and literally this is the beginning. But I also hope that we're not needed in 10 and 20 years, that our kids and our grandkids can go anywhere in the world and not face any form of prejudice and hate. And people know a bit more about them.
Lovely. Amjid, thank you so much for your time. Please don't go anywhere just as I wrap up. Love to have a quick chat with you afterwards. And for everybody else, please do reach out to Amjid. What I will do is with the show notes on the different social media platforms on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and on Twitter, particularly, I'll make sure that the link to his website is available with the show notes as well, so you can reach out directly to him and his organization. And as always, if you are searching for recognition of your prior learning, your prior experience, so that you can gain an academic degree, a bachelor or a master's degree, to reach out to us, www.uard.university. We recognize your background and your experience, and you get academic credit for that, so you can move your career forward to the next level. So we look forward to seeing you again on our next interview with our UARD videocast.